The moment the ground began to vibrate beneath his worn shoes, Daniel Brooks stopped walking. The air split open with the thunder of rotors. He looked up in disbelief as two military-grade helicopters descended into the empty high school football field, whipping dust and grass into the air. A crowd gathered in stunned silence. Before he could process what was happening, men in tactical uniforms jumped out, shouting a question that made his heart slam against his ribs. Where is the doctor? Just minutes earlier, Daniel had been nothing more than a fired single dad, carrying a cardboard box of his belongings. He was replaying the humiliating words of his supervisor, who'd told him the hospital couldn't keep a janitor who asked too many questions, a widower raising a 9-year-old daughter alone, a man who once wore scrubs for a very different reason, before life collapsed under medical debt and grief. As the helicopters settled and the shouting continued, Daniel realized they were looking directly at him. What no one on that road knew was that before he cleaned hospital floors, before he memorized hallways instead of textbooks, Daniel Brooks had been a trauma surgeon. He walked away from the operating room the night his wife died on another surgeon's table, convinced he no longer deserved to save anyone. As the soldiers closed in, they explained a school bus had crashed nearby. The local emergency team was overwhelmed. A child was bleeding internally and couldn't survive transport. Daniel felt an old instinct rise up through the exhaustion and shame. His hands remembered what his heart had tried to forget. Without a word, he dropped the box, climbed into the helicopter, and as it lifted into the sky, he stared at his trembling hands. This was the first time since his wife died that he had chosen to act instead of run. In the makeshift emergency zone, Daniel moved with calm precision, calling for instruments that surprised the medics. He opened an airway, stabilized a shattered body with nothing but focus and memory. When the child finally cried out and the bleeding slowed, the room went still, not with panic, but with awe. Someone whispered that the fired janitor had just done the impossible. Hours later, Daniel slipped away, returning to his walk home, believing that moment wasn't meant for him. But the helicopters were waiting once more, this time not with urgency, but with respect. A senior medical officer explained that Daniel's name had surfaced in old records. His skill had never disappeared, only his permission to use it. When Daniel finally reached his small apartment that night, his daughter ran into his arms asking why helicopters were on the news. He held her tighter than ever before, understanding that losing his job hadn't ended his purpose set, had uncovered it. Sometimes, life strips everything away, not to punish you, but to force the truth back into your hands. As Daniel looked out at the quiet street where his box still sat abandoned, he realized the walk, he thought, marked as Oa's Point, had actually led him back to who he had always been. Not the man who cleaned floors, but the doctor who never truly stopped saving lives, especially the one waiting for him at home. In the years that followed, the helicopters became a distant memory, but Daniel never forgot what they represented. He learned that the loudest turning points often begin with the quietest endings, like a termination letter in a cardboard box. He settled back into his role at the hospital, mentoring younger doctors and advocating for overlooked patients. He realized that losing everything had given him a rare clarity. Titles can be taken and careers can pause, but character only reveals itself under pressure. On the anniversary of the day he was fired, Daniel returned to that same road, now calm and grateful. He realized the walk he thought marked his failure was the beginning of his return to purpose. Sometimes, life removes the uniform so you can remember the calling. It takes everything away so you can see what still remains. You are never defined by the moment you are dismissed, but by the moment you choose to answer. When the world unexpectedly calls your name and asks who you truly are. Thanks for watching.